Phase 4 and 5 of Marvel is a noticeable decline to the previous phases. I don't need to tell you that, there are so many videos on it already, and to be honest, I have had no desire of even wanting to peep most of the projects myself to even find this out for myself. The reason being is that the new stars of the MCU simply are not as interesting as the previous, and even if they were, those characters took 2 hours to make me care, these characters take 8. Marvel at one time had a lot of patience with its stories. We didn't have a world-ending event right around the corner at every step. It took years before the climax of an entire universe to flourish. That time was taken building the main Avengers lineup, a short lineup that was expanded in an easy to digest way. But now we have more characters than ever, to the point where there's so many characters to focus on, we have no ability to focus on any of them. Characters like Moon Knight, America Chavez, Shang-Chi, and even Ms. Marvel are all going to be thrusted into this space civil war. And yet, we don't care. We can't care, and maybe that's why the focus won't be on them. Because, you know, why develop a new X-Men team when we can just reuse the old ones? It's especially demotivating because the X-Men, Fantastic Four, and even Spider-Man to an extent, although he's been here for a while now, seem to have shown up at a really bad time. There were so many dynamics with the original team these characters have missed, so many storylines as well, and don't even get me started on Kang Dynasty. Maybe these storylines aren't the best, but I'll tell you what, they'll be a lot worse if She-Hulk or Sam Wilson is the protagonist. Basically, what I'm trying to get at is the MCU has been so abysmal that the only thing I've been really looking forward to is my street-level Netflix babies. The prospect of seeing more from the cast of characters I got so attached to all those years ago, and ultimately I was okay if they were just relegated to cameos or smaller supporting roles. But when Daredevil Born Again got announced, I was excited, especially because the concept of a Mayor Fisk plotline was so intriguing. But I guess all the STD particles from Phase 4 and 5 rubbed off on the new Netflix kin, cause this show sucks 90% of the time, and it sucks in ways I don't think it had to. The original show had a grunge to it, adoring its own jagged edges. The visuals had bold, striking colors with deep contrast. The characters were almost animals in human clothing, waiting for the opportunity to release their primal emotions onto each other. And it wasn't afraid of tackling mature subjects like gentrifying the lower class or the complexity of faith-based religion, especially when the crusade to express your faith involves violence. There is none of that in this new show. Anything interesting it could say about, for example, a minority family being ostracized by white cops, the police colonizing the Punisher's very ideals and logo, Matt's grief and how hard it is to contain his true nature, Matt's relationship with Catholicism, or his mother, Fisk genuinely trying to be a changed man while being hitched to a Jezebel. This show does nothing interesting with its set dressing. Making a show about Mayor Fisk or Matt starting a new life, you know, being born again, not because it would say anything interesting about either character or the original Netflix show, but seemingly because the Trump allegory was too smart to pass up. You get it, guys? A convicted felon has a say in politics. Except wait, he was never really convicted, was he? So you might be asking, if they were just gonna make a bad show, what's the point of bringing these characters back at all? I don't know! My assumption was that it was to acclimate the original Netflix cast with the greater Marvel universe. But the main antagonist that everyone wanted to be a part of that greater Marvel universe legally can't be used anywhere else.
It's a very hard thing to do, to use my character and for Marvel to use my character. It's a very hard thing to do because of ownership and stuff. Still, I'm only usable for television series.
And vice versa. If you're looking for a Spider-Man crossover, good luck with that. His live-action counterpart is off limits to Disney+. And mind you, that crossover is like the main thing everyone wanted. I'm sure the former Defenders will return. Netflix characters that were abandoned will get a second chance. And there's potential in that Defenders roster growing. But I gotta tell you, with all the stories I actually want to be told being trapped in some amalgamation of Sony and Netflix jail, and with the uncertainty of this new show even being able to take advantage of its own premise, I don't think I really care to stick around. What was once a hopeful escape from the typical post-Endgame Marvel experience is now a directionless, spineless, glorified fanfiction version of the original Netflix series. And whichever creative team you want to blame for that, that's on you. There seems to be a general disinterest in trying new things and creating fresh projects, so a lot of companies will either take existing IPs and adapt them into different art forms, or continue a story that has long since ended. There's potential in that. You're taking something either old or trapped in a certain medium, and exploring how those stories would fare in different circumstances. But if you know anything about the general media landscape, bad sequels have existed for as long as greed has existed, and no one really seems to want to make it stop. The same can be said about bad adaptations or remakes. Netflix and Disney are the main culprits, whether that be Netflix's attempt to wokeify a Nickelodeon cartoon that was already pretty woke, or the DMC Netflix show creator becoming public enemy #1 on the internet because of his shallow rendition of the game's aesthetic and his lack of adherence to what those games even wanted to say. It shouts, "We have Limp Bizkit," without much of the gothic aesthetic from the games that would balance out Fred Durst. And thank God Disney remakes are starting to flop. Why watch the live action remake of Lilo and Stitch when you can watch 3 better versions of it right now? Did you guys like the segue? Sonic Adventure 2 is a story with 2 intersecting narratives. While one is about finding adventure through escaping from a government that has wrongly accused our protagonist, the other is a vengeful tale that tackles how to process grief in a way that doesn't hurt those you should protect. These 2 narratives are both important. Sonic being on the run from the military only expounds on the fact that while he is heroic, he is willing to fight against powers that be if they disagree with his philosophy. On the other hand, Shadow's story will continue to grow throughout later titles. He fights the evil within him through his devilish father figure, makes amends with the system that wants to tear him down, and ultimately decides to do what's best for others on the grander scale, by joining the military he's had beef with for so long. And almost none of this is in the film that's adapting Sonic Adventure 2. And at first, this bothered me. The stories of Sonic are some of the craziest, most cringe, and yet so unabashedly anime gaming has to offer. For all of its faults, the heart of SA2 should be preserved in all of its forms. And I think it still is. At its core, both stories are about how one's pain shouldn't translate to acts of violence against someone else. The message is made even more palpable because it's one that challenges our main character, which for some is a problem. I mentioned that Sonic game stories have a lot of anime elements, and there's more shonen-isms than you might think. A big part of shonen around the time when Sonic stories were out their most ambitious were static main characters. People that can change the world, but the world may never change them. And if anything, their supporting cast becomes the emotional center of their stories. Sonic is no different. He often goes place to place, changing lives, saving people. Things are never really serialized. The idea that, because the Hedgehog has to have a brand new 8-hour adventure every couple of years, stories need to be fresh and easy to pick up every single time. If it were a franchise that is constantly obsessed with its own lore, with its own connections to its overarching story, it has the potential of alienating certain people. Let's just leave it at that. Static mascots work in video games, but not only is the medium as a whole emulating the complex writing styles of film and comic books today, when adapting games into other art forms, unless you're interested in developing like multiple Yoshi tier characters, those mascots are gonna have to at least go through some sort of development, especially in a world where, let's say, comic books live under so many strict mandates and editorial meddling that it's not even clear which characters can be used and how. People give a lot of shit to Ian Flynn for his version of Sonic being a little too lenient when it comes to giving his enemies second chances, and while I agree the context of the comics don't allow the new direction to fully flourish, as it's semi-canon supplemental material made to keep fans waiting for bigger releases, that doesn't mean that the idea is bad in and of itself, or would be an invalid take on the character overall. As a franchise continues, as a brand builds, newer ideas for the characters, the stories gets introduced. It's how longevity is manufactured. So when I see a Sonic who's childish, who's not all cool and smooth, who's still struggling with his sense of belonging, I can't say he's any less than the same character from the source material, just through a different lens. And besides, the character from the source material has been so many things over his 30 years of existence. Like, I'm sorry guys, I just feel like there are bigger fish to fry. There are real depraved people dropping manga because they're written by women, and you're worried about a hedgehog's spines? In addition, Sonic 3 is not only a faithful in spirit adaptation, it's almost hyper aware of the franchise's strengths. Instead of disregarding those strengths just for the sake of doing something new and subversive, God, I hate you. It's the most mature entry so far, and it leans into the game's iconography more than ever. It takes musical cues from the games, its humor has improved. It's impressive how this franchise builds upon itself while innovating the source material in new ways. For almost 6 episodes, Born Again does not make the death of the heart of the original show worth it, and instead spits in the face of him and those who put Fisk where he belongs by acquitting him of all of his crimes, off-screen. I had a theory that he merely used the blip to his advantage, or at the very least, showed good enough behavior throughout the 8-year time skip, but no, he really just got away with everything. And Foggy, a character that should have gotten a happy ever after, with his friends and the law firm that flourished, passed away for seemingly no reason besides justifying why Matt thinks saving people is bad. Kingpin is a fascinating guy. He's born out of this thesis that most comic book characters are just children crying out for something more. For Fisk, it's crying out for the power to protect.
When I was a boy.
No, you don't get to. You don't get to do that.
So it makes sense why he would want to genuinely be clean when running for mayor. However, he seemingly has no ulterior motive to actually want to be a changed man. We know this because in his last appearance, Echo, he is seemingly keeping his criminal empire alive, only really wanting to be mayor to expand his empire in new ways. The new directors, Beavis and Butthead, tried to hide this fact as it was obviously a remnant from the production pre-overhaul. But what could have been a genuinely interesting journey of a villain trying to reform after being apart from his love and his power for so long was rushed, used up in the span of a few episodes. Terrible episodes, mind you. Now? He's just gonna go back to being an evil bastard with no regard for guilt or remorse, for Kristen Ritter and Cherry with a PP gun to beat up. When this pseudo-reboot could have done much more with him. His grand scheme? Built a big boat. I'm like half kidding. Those who want to enforce that plan are his Punisher goons. Frank Castle is left face to face with some of them. But the soundtrack for the show is so loud, the needle drops are so distracting, the blood effects are so cartoony, and the editing is so over the top and fast paced that he can barely get a word in about them. There are real life cops who use Frank's imagery in some veiled excuse for their own hurtful and right-wing injustice, but I guess the show literally critiquing vigilantism has nothing to say about that besides Frank telling them they wasn't with him shooting in the gym. Matt seemingly has nothing to say about Frank killing people right in front of him. He just gives a vague, "Frank, you asshole!"
Yusuke, you asshole!
And pretty much just moves on with his day. Matt's persona, his beliefs, what he's running from, and what he's trying to believe in is so inconsistent in this show, even within the vacuum of the reshoots, that I have to question what his character arc even is, especially since the whole Hector subplot turned out to be nothing more than a plot device. What's the point of him trying to remove himself from the Daredevil persona and the violence that comes with it if he's literally just gonna go f it and go back to what he was doing? The final episode is what I wanted. The characters I've grown attached to meeting again, sharing banter, and getting involved in a new storyline. But given what I had to watch to get to that point, I would have rather they just not bother at all. And as harsh as I've admittedly been, the thing I'm most upset about is having to wait yet another year for this sequel series to get its shit together when I've already waited almost a decade. You know, in another life, counselor, you would have been defending me.
Well, it's too bad, Poindexter, because in this life, all I want to do is kiss you.
Oh, just get over here, you handsome devil. Mwah, 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 mwah. Gay people.
Hey Eli, you forgot to talk about Muse.
Are you sure? Don't get me wrong, you can like or dislike whatever interpretation of a character you want, and if you're a fan of something, it's entirely normal to feel like they've been wronged by another writer. But I feel like we as a culture have a habit of instantly hating on an adaptation just because it's different from what we usually like. Especially in the case of Western franchises, which defines itself by eras instinctively. I think there's beauty in that. A story you don't like, a character you think is uninteresting can be remade by an entirely different person and used to its fullest potential. But don't get me wrong, change can also destroy an entire franchise and its identity. If you don't remember to keep the core of an icon intact, your adaptation, or especially subsequent entries, will feel hollow, will feel wrong, and probably will be wrong. Let it be known, I don't hate Daredevil Born Again because it's different from the original show. I hate it because it's different in ways that actively sabotage itself. It's different in ways that feel insulting to everything the original show was trying to do, and what good comic adaptations do in general. And I think that's the key. Sonic fans get so up in arms about American Sonic, Japanese Sonic, and how the characters were written during certain game periods. And you can for sure have a preference as to what version of a character you like the most, but at the same time, you can look at all of these interpretations and still feel the essence of what this franchise was about all along. In Born Again's case, it is so far removed from the original show and what it did with its original tone and themes, it's no wonder it started off as a reboot. And to be honest with you, given the information we know about which episodes were written pre and post-production rehaul, it wouldn't have been a good reboot anyways. Changing what people know to be the lore and context for a series or franchise is perfectly fine. There's beauty to be found in how different writers can look at the same media and come away with different readings. But once you start taking that media away from what made it so engaging, heartfelt, and special in the first place, then we have a problem.
Hey kids! So as you probably already know, Marvel was really bankrupt in the 90s, and so to compensate, they sold all of their film rights to different studios. Spider-Man went to Sony, X-Men went to Fox, etc. Though, as you could probably tell, Marvel is doing pretty well as of late, and they'd probably be able to do even better if they had the full rights to their characters. And even though they've bought out most of these studios, there's still some characters they can't use to their full potential. So remember kids, if you're one broke-ass motherfucker, and I know you are cause why would you be watching me otherwise, and you wanna, as the whites say, crash out and sell some of your prized possessions, don't fold, because that's no good.